What's up, Ice and Fire fans? Welcome back to the House of Vine podcast and the episode 2 breakdown of Game of Thrones Season 8. This was a pretty decent episode, so let's get into it. Episode 2, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. This episode title is a reference to the book by George R. R. Martin of the same name. It is a collection of all three Dunk and Egg novellas, Dunk being Sir Duncan the Tall and Egg being Aegon V, Jon Snow's great-grandfather in the show and great-great-grandfather in the books. Sir Duncan was one of the greatest knights the Seven Kingdoms had ever seen, and he probably wasn't even a knight. Brienne's character closely parallels Sir Duncan. We'll talk about that later. The episode begins with Sir Jaime being confronted by Sansa and Daenerys in Winterfell's Great Hall. Dany mentions how her and her brother used to come up with all kinds of ways of how they would hurt the man who murdered their father. Now, Dany is rightfully upset because obviously Jaime is the one who put the nail in the coffin of House Targaryen by killing the Mad King Aerys. Sansa then adds that he attacked Ned and Jory in the streets of King's Landing.
Take him alive. Kill his men.
Jaime defends himself by simply claiming that they were at war. Jaime only attacked Lord Eddard because Catelyn kidnapped Tyrion, though she kidnapped Tyrion because of the cutthroat and the whole Bran getting pushed out of a window thing. Speaking of which, we hear Bran saying, "The things we do for love." This kind of freaks out Jaime, which is similar to a scene from last season between Littlefinger and Bran.
Chaos is a ladder.
None of you knows the truth.
You held a knife to his throat. You said I did warn you not to trust me.
Luckily for Jaime, Lady Brienne steps up and vouches for Sir Jaime, telling Sansa that if it wasn't for him, Sansa would be dead. Now, during Jaime's little trial, Dany and company finally learn that Cersei is definitely not sending any troops north to help with the upcoming battle, which doesn't surprise Sansa. Dany, though, is furious at Tyrion. He has perpetually been dropping the ball since the start of Season 7, and Dany has questioned his loyalty 3 times now. Later in the episode, Ser Jorah visits Dany and reminds her that Tyrion is probably the smartest man in the Seven Kingdoms, and it would be very unwise to replace him as Hand of the Queen. Moving on, we still see Gendry working his ass off in Winterfell's forge. We see Arya stroll in, longingly gazing at him. This wouldn't be the first time she looked at Gendry that way. Arya goes on to ask him what the enemy is like. What do they look like? What do they smell like? Gendry tells her that they are death, plain and simple. Arya says that she's seen many faces of death, an obvious reference to the many-faced god. Meanwhile, she shows off her kunai throwing skills, which is a callback to the pilot episode where Arya shows off when Bran is practicing his archery. Speaking of Bran, Jaime comes to apologize for pushing him out of that window. Like I suspected in the last breakdown, Bran was fine with it. Jaime wouldn't have become a better man, and Bran wouldn't have become the three-eyed raven if it hadn't been for Jaime pushing him out of that window. Jaime then wonders about the future, and Bran is like, What makes you think there isn't afterwards? And Jaime gives him a very worried look, but then Bran is like, nah, I'm just joking. There's a future, but it's not great. Next we see the Northmen still working hard at building up Winterfell's defenses. Now these structures are very reminiscent of the Czech hedgehogs found on the beaches of Normandy during World War II. You can see that they've been covered in dragon glass, and so have the battlements, which we saw them preparing last episode. Jaime meets back up with his brother. Tyrion is pretty convinced he's going to be brutally killed here at Winterfell. He jokes how he'd much rather die with a belly full of ale and a girl's mouth around his cock. Jaime's heard him say this before, and so have we, back in Season 1.
How would you like to die, Tyrion, son of Tywin?
In my own bed, at the age of 80, with a belly full of wine and a girl's mouth around my cock?
Jaime then gets a glimpse of Lady Brienne. He goes to ask her if he'd be allowed the honor to serve under her when the battle begins. Brienne of Tarth has been given the command of the left flank, which according to the map should be here. The two of them fighting side by side in the upcoming battle is significant. Each wields a part of what was once the Valyrian steel sword, Ice, the Stark ancestral sword. The sword Ice is there in spirit, protecting Winterfell from its enemies. So let's move on to the meeting between Dany and Sansa. Earlier when Ser Jorah told Dany not to dismiss Tyrion as her hand, he also suggested she make peace with Sansa. Sansa is worried that her brother has been manipulated by a beautiful woman, and we know what happened the last time one of her brothers fell in love. Daenerys claims that it was she who was manipulated since she's up here fighting Jon's war, putting her own conquest on hold. However, Sansa wonders what happens after Dany sits the Iron Throne. The Northerners fought for the right to rule themselves, that they won't bow again. Basically saying, you better marry Jon when everything is said and done. This doesn't sit well with Dany, and the fact that she already feels manipulated by Jon to some degree, when she finds out the truth about his parents, she's gonna question his original motives. Dany and Sansa's conversation is cut short, however, with the arrival of Theon and some of his Iron Men. Is it just me, or does Dany look kinda concerned that Theon came to fight specifically for the Starks and not for her? Back outside, we see the always humble Ser Davos serving food to the small folk. He meets this little girl with a burn mark on her cheek, reminding Davos and the audience of poor Princess Shireen, Stannis Baratheon's daughter. Now, this little girl's brothers were soldiers and probably fought and died during the Battle of the Bastards. Davos and Gilly convince her to go down to the crypts of Winterfell because that's where Gilly and Sam will be, and she can be there to protect them. They say that the crypts will be the safest spot during the battle. It won't be. Later, after Jon, Sam, and Ed have a short reunion, he learns that the Umbers have been hit and that Winterfell is next. A war council follows, and Jon tells them that their best chance at defeating the entire army of the dead is to kill the one that created them all. We saw last season what happened when one of the Night's King's lieutenants was taken out by Jon. We also hear Lord Beric's thoughts on the matter.
Killed him. He turned them all.
So basically, think Anakin blowing up the droid mothership in The Phantom Menace.
What are they doing? The control ship has been destroyed. Look! They are broken.
Or that scene from Ender's Game.
You took out that one particular ship and the rest just gave up? Why?
To what animals are Formix most often compared?
Ants.
Which have?
A queen who directs the worker ants. What she thinks they do. Without her, they can't think for themselves, and they die.
Or that Chitauri scene in the first Avengers. You get the point. Next, we get Bran dropping what I feel was supposed to be a bigger bombshell for the audience, but I don't know. The Night King wants a endless night, go figure, but more importantly, wants to kill off the three-eyed raven, the living embodiment of the world's memories. Bran explains how the Night King has come after many three-eyed ravens in the past, most likely failing every time because once he gets close to killing one, a new warg got a data dump like Bran in Season 6. Sam chimes in with the line,
"That's what death is, isn't it? Forgetting. Being forgotten. If we forget where we've been and what we've done, we're not men anymore. Just animals. Your memories don't come from books. Your stories aren't just stories. If I wanted to erase the world of men, I'd start with you."
This is very similar to the quote by the artist Banksy. They say you die twice, one time when you stop breathing and a second time a bit later on when somebody says your name for the last time. If the Night King is truly working towards the destruction of all the world's memories, then I definitely see Oldtown being on his hit list. The Citadel is the pinnacle of Westerosi knowledge. If the Night King were to fly to Oldtown and burn it to the ground, it would be very similar to the burning of the Library of Alexandria and the loss of generations upon generations of science and culture. So it is decided that Bran needs to be protected at all cost. Bran will hide in the Godswood with Theon and his Ironborn there to protect him. Arya wonders if Dragonfire can kill the Night King, but Bran isn't sure that no one has ever tried. Most likely, it won't, because if it did, we wouldn't get a sick 1v1 with Jon stabbing a flaming sword through the Night King's chest. Fingers crossed. After everyone pours out of the room, Tyrion and Bran have a nice little hangout session. Since there is a strong possibility that Bran is going to die, it is quite possible Tyrion might have just gotten his own massive info dump, because the next time we see Tyrion, he's getting lit. Alongside his brother, he is joined by our favorite side characters, Brienne, Podrick, Ser Davos, and Tormund the Giantsbane himself. This story about him suckling on a giant's titty for a month is straight from the books. This shit was hilarious. However, this story, like others, is probably made up.
Of course, I'd had a good bit to drink. Her fangs were sharp, but she knew how to use them. And she was nice and soft down below. Oh, she was no ordinary beast. Benny's the man with a...
I know you never fucked a bear. You know you never fucked a bear. Right now, I don't want to think about the bear you never fucked.
Then we get the best scene of the episode, Lady Brienne finally becoming a knight. Sir Jaime anoints her as he speaks the words, which we've heard before from Ser Jorah when speaking with Ser Barristan.
Robert knighted you after the battle. Proudest moment of my life. One knee in the dust, king's sword on my shoulder, listening to the words, "In the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave."
As she rises, Tormund is like, "Fuck kneeling, this was the coolest thing I've ever seen." So, Brienne of Tarth, a knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Like I stated back at the start of my video, that is a reference to Sir Duncan, a former Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Now, Martin has basically confirmed that Brienne is a direct descendant of Sir Duncan. Not only are they related, but their characters are very similar. Both have dedicated to living their lives honorably, but neither were actually knights. In the short story The Hedge Knight, we are introduced to Sir Duncan the Tall, a boy supposedly knighted by Sir Arlen of Pennytree on his deathbed. However, there are few clues in the story that suggest that Dunk may not have been knighted at all. Now, this isn't the only Dunk and Egg reference we get during this hangout session. The song that Podrick sings is called Jenny's Song. Jenny of Oldstones was the wife of Duncan Targaryen, son of Aegon V. She claimed to be descended from the Children of the Forest. Prince Duncan gave up his own crown to marry Jenny. This might happen with Jon, a Targaryen prince, giving up his crown for the person he loves. This song was also a favorite of a Woods Witch that was close to Jenny. The Woods Witch prophesied that the prince that was promised would be born from the line of the Mad King, which happens to be both Dany and Jon. And this Woods Witch has a pretty high record of getting shit right. She predicted the death of Renly Baratheon, the death of Balon Greyjoy, and the Red Wedding. Moving on, we get back outside to the battlements where we meet up with Arya and the Hound. That doesn't last long because she's trying to get some. She finds out that Gendry is Robert Baratheon's son, and she's like, oh, word? Then Gendry looks at her and is like,
What the hell are you doing?
We have about 5 minutes left to live, the whole world's gonna end. You said you'd fuck me.
I mentioned last week how they were probably gonna hook up. Also on the battlements, we get another mention of how the crypts will be the safest place during the battle, and then we hear it said again when Ser Jorah tries to convince his cousin, Lady Lyanna, to stay in the crypts as well. The scene with Lady Mormont is followed by another pretty great scene when Sam gifts his family's sword, Heartsbane, to Ser Jorah. If you remember from last season, Jon tried to give Ser Jorah back Longclaw, but he said that he didn't deserve it. Now, though he's made some mistakes, Ser Jorah is an honorable man and he has come back to defend the North and his house. Being gifted with a new Valyrian steel sword is kind of a seal of approval for his knighthood. Finally, we head down to the crypts that we've been hearing about all episode. She wonders who this statue is and she learns that it's Lyanna Stark. She wonders how a man like Rhaegar Targaryen would kidnap and rape someone. But then she is completely surprised to learn that Jon Snow is actually Rhaegar's son. And what is her reaction? Is it, oh my gosh, my brother's son lives, I'm not the only person left of my family? No. Is it, oh my god, I've been having sex with my nephew? Nope. It's, you have a claim to the throne. Jon looks at her like, are you serious? We're all about to die. But once again, before a great conversation can continue, it is interrupted. The dead have finally come. So that's basically it. Okay, so now let me know who you think's gonna die in this upcoming battle. Who do you think's going to survive? Is the show painting Dany as the final villain? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. And as always, share, like, and subscribe to stay updated and be the first to watch newly uploaded videos.